NFL Talk with Elite Wages.
Yo, what's happening, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of NFL Talk with Elite Wages. This is going to be a long one. It's going to be a bit of a banger, in my opinion. Probably my favourite one of the season, and that is obviously because it's the postseason now. So we're into postseason. We've got some really nice and fun matchups heading into this postseason. 6 games across the weekend, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, a Sunday night football as well, and then finishing on Monday night football. I've actually really struggled this week to pick sides. It's been just as difficult to pick totals and other props as well, just because regular season is now done and dusted. It goes out the window. Everything from that, you're one and done in the playoffs. Everyone's fighting for that same goal to get to the Super Bowl. Everyone fights for that extra yard because that could literally be the difference to carrying on or going home. So it's been really tough, but I'm confident in all the plays I've taken this weekend. I hope everyone's ready for a nice and long breakdown episode. So let's dive in. Take my first play for the NFL Wildcard Weekend, and that's going to start off on Saturday. That's going to be in the game between the Chargers and the Texans. So, like I said, it's been really, really tough to pick an area where I want to put my money on this week. This game is probably one of the hard. Well, I'm going to say that in every breakdown, every game this week has been really difficult to put money on. But I got there in this game. I found somewhere in the end to place my money. In this game, I'm going to be backing Jim Harbaugh and his Chargers team. Prior to the season, I was actually fairly high on the Texans. I expected them to be the contenders to the Chiefs in this conference. And that's where I sort of put them in their chances and in their standards for this year. But they've actually not played too well this year. In fact, they've actually been very underwhelming. Obviously, last year they played very, very well. CJ Stroud played very, very well. But this year they've actually been disappointing. They've done the complete opposite. CJ Stroud isn't the same player as he was last year. And obviously the whole team hasn't been as good. But despite a solid 5-1 record on paper to start the year, those first 5 wins were really quite disappointing. They played 2 playoff teams. They beat Buffalo, but lost to Minnesota. The other 4 were against non-playoff teams, and they only won one of those by more than 1 score. If you dive a little deeper, they played 11 games against non-playoff teams this year, winning against only 8, showing they struggled to play against better opponents. Of the 6 playoff teams, they won just 1. Headed into the playoffs, momentum is going to be a good thing to have. And that is what the Texans don't have. They've gone 2-2 in the last 4 games. They lost against the Chiefs and the Ravens, which were 2 playoff teams, 2 AFC teams as well. So they could potentially somewhere along the line, if they do get past this game, they will face more than likely one of those 2 teams. And they actually only beat the Titans with their backups in the final week. Obviously, they've had some tough blows, especially on offense. Joe Mixon, Nico Collins both missed short periods during the season. Stephon Diggs was out for the majority of the season too. He was out quite early in the season. And obviously Tank Dell now on IR as well. He's going to miss the rest of the season too. But they still have a talented team on offense. It just hasn't sort of translated. Houston ranking 19th for points per game on average with 21. But it has to be reiterated that they've played 11 games against non-playoff teams. Teams they should be beaten by more than 1 score, especially if you want to be sort of a contender to the Chiefs, the current Super Bowl holders. Only 3 of their wins have been by more than 1 score. A win by 20 against the Patriots, a win by 24 against the Cowboys, and a 9-point win against the Titans in a meaningless game last week, meaning their average win margin is 8.2. But winning against 20 against the Patriots and 24 against the Cowboys isn't really anything to write home about. Teams have been able to keep it close with the Texans. That's a mixture of their offense being underwhelming and the defense struggling too. They average 21 points per game allowed to opponents on average. They've actually allowed 20 points or more in 13 games this year. While Houston's defense ranks 14th, the visitors are in the top of the charts in that area. So the LA Chargers, they've actually been really, really incredible on defense this year. They average a league low 17 points per game to opponents, a number they have only allowed teams to exceed just 7 times, and actually as well, they only allow 4 teams to score more than 20. So like I said, they are top of the league on defense. They are the best defensive team in terms of points per game allowed. They're actually one of the best at generating pressure towards quarterbacks too. They average 2.7 sacks per game, which is something Stroud and his offensive line have struggled to handle. They have allowed Stroud to be sacked 3.2 times on average this year. I believe this game will be won with the LA defense, but their offense has actually flown under the radar too. They've actually quietly enjoyed success. They rank in 11th for points per game on average with 23.6, so just outside the top 10. But as I said, for the Texans side of this bet, momentum is a nice thing to have headed into the playoffs. And while they haven't faced the best of teams to end the year, they have won 3 straight, scoring 34, 40 and 34 points. I believe the Chargers are the better team all round. Their defense is significantly better. Herbert has been playing a really good game as well, been really efficient. He's been playing a lot better than CJ Stroud. The LAC run game has been, on par with the Texans, if not a little bit better, with DK Dobbins. Can't get my words out. Just offensively, the Chargers have clicked better, and it's shown with them scoring more points per game and having that extra win under the belt as well. The Texans' win margin was 8, like I mentioned. The Chargers' win margin is 13.8. This game being an away game for the Chargers doesn't really concern me either. They've played away from home 9 times. They've won 6, and they actually hold a 7-2 record against the spread while playing away as well. I believe this is a game that the Chargers know they can win, and I believe they can win as well. And I think they will win. Getting this at a key number under -3 is an added bonus. It actually saves us from a push situation if they win by a field goal. I'm going to roll with the very calm and collected Justin Herbert and his offense, and the Chargers' top 5 defense. So I'm going to go 1 unit on the Chargers -2.5 at odds of 1.83. So next up, we're going to stay on Saturday. We got a divisional rematch. This will actually be the 3rd time these teams have played each other this season, with both teams taking a win each after the Steelers won 18-16 back in week 11, and the Ravens dominated in the rematch in week 16, winning 34-17. So this is obviously the game against the Ravens and the Steelers. I think we can all agree both teams have taken different trajectories throughout the season. The Ravens have been very consistent, losing their opening 2 games, but then going on to win 12 of the next 15 remaining games. So they went 12-3 in the last 15 games. As for the Steelers, they've been very up and down. They started their season 3-0. They went into their bye week 6-2, which is very, very good. But in those first 5 weeks where Fields was their quarterback, he actually threw for under 200 yards in 3 of 6 games they played. They actually really struggled to score points on offense as well. They relied heavily on their defense to secure wins. With Fields being their quarterback, they sort of just got by. They got by and did what was necessary to win games. They didn't sort of blow anyone out. They weren't a scary team to face on offense. When Wilson was introduced as quarterback 1 in week 7, for the first few weeks he gave them something different on offense and created a little spark. They scored 37, 28 and 26 in his first 2 games, which was significantly higher than the first 6 games where Fields was their quarterback. But that soon dwindled out as the final 8 games they actually scored under 20 in 6 games. They lost their final 4 straight games, and their offensive struggles saw them finish in 16th for points per game on average with 22. Defensively much better, averaging 20 points per game to opponents, but only managed to hold 8 teams under 20 points in 17 weeks this year. As for the hosts, the Baltimore Ravens, as mentioned, they've been exceptional. As I said, the Ravens ended their season losing only 5 games all year. Their offense has been top of the league in most categories, including being the best rushing team in the league with 187 yards per game on the ground. Obviously led by Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. But Derrick Henry himself finished with the 2nd most rushing yards with 1,921. He was actually tied first for rushing touchdowns as well with 16. The Ravens pass game, also a top unit, averaged 237 pass yards per game, which is 7th most, led by MVP favourite Lamar Jackson, who finished with over 4,000 yards through the air, as well as having 41 passing touchdowns, which is 2nd most. And all in all, the offense as a whole is ranked inside the top 3 in most categories, which includes 1st for total yards per game with 424, 3rd for touchdowns per game with 3.8, and 3rd for points per game average with 30.5. This team can dominate in every way. It's very consistent in doing it as well. They've scored 20 or more in 15 out of 17 games this season. So while the Ravens have been a top offense and a top run offense in particular, they're also the best run defense in the league too. They rank 1st for least amount of points, least amount of rushing yards allowed per game with just 80. They have been exploited a little bit in the passing game, as they allow the 2nd most yards through the air with 244, but led by a player inside the top 5 for tackles, Roquan Smith. This defense has been consistently pressuring quarterbacks, and they average 3.2 sacks per game, which is a very good matchup in this one, as Russell Wilson has been sacked an average of 3 times per game as well. So all in all, the Ravens defense ranks inside the top 10 and is also ranked 9th for points per game allowed with 21. So, with a solid defense for the Ravens, an even better offense, this game swings well in favour of the Ravens with a minus 10-point spread. Their defense should shut down Wilson, and that'll allow Lamar and co more opportunities on offense to score points. Their top offense can exploit the Steelers defense, as they did a few weeks ago after scoring 34 points. I've mentioned momentum in the first breakdown. That's going to be a key for these breakdowns as well, so listen out for the word momentum as well. The Steelers lack momentum, losing 4 straight, allowing 27 points per game on average in those 4 games, and in fact they've actually just won 2 of the last 7, and they've averaged just 14 points per game in those 4 straight losses. Their team total high being just 17 in those same 4 games. I think the Steelers will struggle. The Ravens actually have a ton of momentum. They've won the most recent 4 games, scoring 30 plus in all 4 with 32.5 on average. I actually think this bet is a no-brainer. I think the total is a little bit too low for a team of this offensive caliber, especially for a winner-takes-all game. So I'm going to go 1 unit on the Ravens, team total over 26.5 with odds of 1.83. Next game. Here we have a game that I, for one, did not expect. It's the Broncos against the Bills. Headed into the season, I had a bold prediction that Josh Allen would really struggle without Davis and Diggs. I had a prediction that the Bills wouldn't make the playoffs. I also had the same prediction for the Broncos. I thought after a poor season last year, now being led by a rookie quarterback, I expected there to be a settling in phase for the rookie. But in both predictions, I was absolutely wrong. So here we have the number 2 seed Buffalo Bills, led by MVP, front runner, along with Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, facing the number 7 seed, the Denver Broncos, led by potential Rookie of the Year, Bo Nix. I think it's safe to say that we have to get rid of the narrative that rookie quarterbacks are going to struggle with the transition from college football into the NFL, because Bo Nix has played very well all season long. He had a few games where he struggled, but who doesn't have those games where they have an off day, or they have a little struggle sometimes. Sometimes defense cooks up a little bit against certain players. For the majority of the season, he's thrown for 200 plus yards. He's done that on 13 occasions. After losing their opening 2 games, the Broncos went on to recover to 2-2, and from week 4 onwards, they maintained a .500 record or higher, and they actually finished the season 10-7. On occasions, the Broncos did struggle to find some offense, but they do have a solid defense, which has helped contribute to their wins. Offensively, they scored 20 or more in 12 out of 17 games, including 7 straight. I'll come back to those 7 games in a little bit. On the year, they've averaged their 10th best, 25 points per game. As I mentioned, their defense has done a solid job contributing to their wins too. They're actually currently the 3rd best team at limiting points to opponents, averaging 18 points per game allowed, and the 2nd best team at limiting opponent touchdowns with just 1.9. teams actually struggle when they face the Denver Broncos. They only allow 317 total yards on offense, which is 7th lowest. These kind of stats are a good sign for this team, and their offense, as it gives them more opportunities to score points. The Bills, on the other side, they're no pushover. They've earned their right to get into this position, and they will be the Broncos' toughest opponents yet. After all, the last time the Broncos faced an offensively strong team like the Bills, they lost 41-10 to the Ravens and then 30-24 to the Bengals. The Bills rank in second in points per game on average, averaging 30, a number they've hit or exceeded in 13 of their 17 games. Their offense has clicked without Davis and Diggs. A mixture of Josh Allen and James Cook has been lethal. Allen's stats haven't been anywhere near his best, but he's the second most efficient quarterback. James Cook also finished with over 1,000 yards on the ground, tied first for rushing touchdowns as well with 16, but he actually had 18 in total. Both of those areas are areas that can be exploited in the Broncos defense. The Bills defense has been okay. They've only faced 2 top 10 offenses this season, and they conceded 35 to the Ravens and 42 to the Lions. But they have, however, allowed 12 teams to score 20 or more this season. Their defense ranks in 11th for points per game allowed, on average, allowing 21. This game was a really tough one to call, as they all are. I believe there are many areas on the field that can be exploited by both teams. I don't believe the Bills cover a -9 spread, but I'm not totally confident in the Broncos covering a +9 spread either, despite them covering a +9 in all but one game this season. I did see a frightening little stat on Twitter a few days back. Let me just try and find it now. Hang on. There it is, right. A rookie quarterback making their first playoff start against a quarterback with playoff experience had just 19, 37 and 1 against the spread, which is 34% since 2002. If you add that to the fact the Broncos only had 2 wins against playoff caliber teams in the regular season, and one of those was against the Chiefs, who had no intentions to win or even play in that game, I do, however, believe the Broncos will fight in this game no matter what the score. Even though it's a tough ask, there's nothing more than I love than a potential underdog upset, and this is a huge spot for the Broncos to do just that. But in order to do that, they need to score points and they need to keep it competitive. The Broncos team total line is set at 17.5, and I believe that's a little bit too low for a team that's consistently scored 20, and a little bit low for a playoff team looking to cause an upset. The Bills' defense can be exploited. I believe the Broncos will fight until the end. I said I'd come back to those 7 games for the Broncos. Yet again, the theme is momentum. The last 7 games for the Broncos have seen them score 24 or more in all 7, and in fact they actually averaged 32 points per game in those 7 games, which is a huge wave of momentum to be riding heading into this game. So I'm going to go 1 unit on the Broncos team total over 17.5 at odds of 1.85. Now this is actually going to be the first game that I have 2 plays in, so I'm going to piggyback a little bit off the Broncos team total. The Broncos quarterback has been really reliant on short to mid-range passes. The Bills tend to play 2 high safeties, which eliminates big chunk plays, so that could fall into Bo Nix's favour. But Bo Nix has also relied on his legs a few times this season. He's rushed for 20 plus in 10 games this year. But with those 2 high safeties, it gives more room to run for first downs if a pass isn't available. With it being the playoffs, teams and quarterbacks will do whatever it takes, including putting their bodies on the line, to create plays to stay in the postseason. Bills' weakness has been their run defense, so I'm going to look for the Broncos to draw up some designed quarterback runs, or even if that doesn't work out, a few little scramble drills for Bo Nix to rush for some first downs. So I'm going to go 1 unit on Bo Nix over 22.5 rushing yards at odds of 1.9. So here we go. For me, as a Packers fan, this is a highly anticipated game. As a sports bettor, it's just as difficult to predict as every other game. The Eagles are favoured now by 5 points, which at the top of your head seems like the right line. They've been a part of some really impressive wins, and the Packers have been known to lose against playoff teams this year. But even so, the Packers have kept all games close, all losses close. They've actually lost by 5 points or less in 4 of those 5 losses. But the Eagles have actually won by 5 or more on 11 occasions. But despite that, looking through the stats for this game, both teams are very, very, very similar. So let me just read out some of the stats in comparison to one another. So for points per game for the Packers, it's 27.1. For the Eagles, it's 27.2. So that's marginal. Rush yards per game, 147 for the Packers, 179 for the Eagles, so not too much difference there. Pass yards per game, 223 for the Packers, 187 for the Eagles, so that's a little bit of a chunk for the Packers ahead there. Touchdowns per game, 3.1 for the Packers, 3.2 for the Eagles. Quarterback sacked, 1.3 for the Packers, 2.6 for the Eagles. Turnovers per game, 1.1 for Packers, 0.9 for Eagles. Total yards per game, 370 for the Packers, 367 for the Eagles, 3 yards difference in total yards. Third down conversions for the Packers, 4.4 and 5.8 for the Eagles. Field goals made, 1.9 for the Packers, 1.6 for the Eagles. On the defensive side, points per game allowed by the Packers is 19.9, 17.8 for the Eagles. Rush yards per game allowed 99.4 for the Packers, 104.2 for the Eagles. Passing yards per game allowed 215 for the Packers, 174 for the Eagles. Total yardage per game, 314 for the Packers, 278 for the Eagles. Touchdowns per game allowed by the Packers is 2.3, 1.9 for the Eagles. Sacks per game, 2.6 and 2.4. Turnovers per game, turnovers forced per game, 1.8 for the Packers, 1.5 for the Eagles. Third down conversions allowed, 4.6 for the Packers and 4.4 for the Eagles. Field goals allowed, 1.4 for the Packers and 1.5 for the Eagles. So as you can tell, both of these teams are very, very, very similar, which in my opinion was very unexpected. A lot of those lines, a lot of those stats are actually, within a few yards. It's actually crazy how similar these two teams are. I actually expected the Eagles to be a little bit better all over the field, considering they're the number 2 seed, nearly 5-point favourites. But even so, this game was nearly a no play for me. I couldn't quite find an edge big enough. I even thought about hoping for both teams to come together and cash on a line such as the total rushing yards, etc. But even though both are very good rushing teams, they're both equally as good run defence. I do believe both teams scoring a rushing touchdown is a good play. I couldn't find a market for that, so I had to dig a little bit deeper into my bag of knowledge. I actually found a bet I'm comfortable with taking for 2 units. So it's going to be my only 2-unit play of the weekend. It may not be common knowledge to the entire sort of betting community, or anyone that watches NFL or anything like that. It's not sort of a common thing people look for. But the Packers just so happen to be one of the best teams in the first quarter, and they actually play their best football within the first quarter. We actually rank second for points per game within the first quarter, averaging 6.4, and with the Packers' first quarter team total set at 0.5, I think it's a no-brainer to be considering this bet. They've scored points in the first quarter in 13 out of 17 games. As for the Eagles, they actually struggle in the first quarter. They average 4.5 points per game allowed in the first quarter, but they have actually allowed points in 12 of their 17 games. That included 2 field goals to the Packers in the first quarter in week 1. To double down on this play is a little bit of a risk, but no risk, no reward. Like I said, the Packers are a top team in the first quarter. I didn't just mean that on offense; I meant that defensively too, as no one allows less points per game in the league in the first quarter than the Packers, who average just 2.4. With the Eagles only averaging 3.6 on offense in the first quarter themselves, this favours the Packers a lot. This game could be pretty much decided in the first quarter. Holding a lead could be crucial. For the Packers, they've won or tied the first quarter on 13 occasions, where the Eagles have won the first quarter only 4 times. So it's a risk, but I'm backing the Packers to show up and come out all guns blazing within this first quarter. I think they start off hot. I think they punch the Eagles right in the mouth in the run game from the get-go, and I believe they try and jump out to a little bit of a lead. So that's the reason I'm going to take 2 units on the Packers first quarter, team total over 0.5. That's at odds of 1.6, so 2 units will return 1 unit profit. And I'm going to go for 1 unit on the Packers first quarter plus 0.5. That's going to be odds of 1.83.
Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, so we're on to Sunday Night Football. Heading into the season, I wasn't actually big on both of these teams, but as the season progressed, I have become big on both of these two teams. So the Bucs and the Commanders have both exceeded my expectations. The Commanders more than the Bucs, but both have still been playing at a high level. Going back to the stat I mentioned in the Broncos and Bills game, about the rookie quarterback. A rookie quarterback making his first playoff appearance against an experienced quarterback only covers the spread in 33% of games. Mayfield is actually 2-2 in the playoffs, and he's actually been really good win or loss. He averages 288 yards and 2.5 touchdowns, but has thrown 3 touchdowns in 3 of his 4 appearances in the playoffs. He has he's led this Tampa Bay team to be one of the best offensive teams in the league, even without Chris Godwin. Mayfield actually finished his season with over 4,500 passing yards, which was 3rd most. He threw 41 touchdowns and just 2 touchdowns behind touchdown leader Joe Burrow. He and his team are averaging a 4th highest points per game on average with 29.5. One place behind them, averaging 28.5, is the Washington Commanders. The Bucs defense isn't really the best either. They allow an average of 22 points per game and have allowed opponents to score 20 or more in 10 games this year, which that doesn't sound too bad, but they have played 9 teams that didn't make the playoffs. A surprise entrant into this postseason, but definitely a worthy one, is the Washington Commanders. Daniels has been really, really good, and he's been a really good addition for this Washington team. He's gave them a new dynamic, which they haven't really had for a long time in that quarterback position. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's a very, very accurate passer, and he's a dominant runner as well. He broke a number of records this season, one being most rush yards by a rookie quarterback. Another few which sort of tied together. He had the highest completion percentage in their first 4 games. He also became only the 2nd player to have a 90-plus passer rating in those same first 4 games. He also set a single game rookie record for completion percentage with 91.3% as he completed 21 out of 23 passes in week 3. This guy isn't a normal rookie. He's an absolute baller. Like I said before, I think we need to get rid of the narrative where rookie quarterbacks are going to struggle on the transition from college into the league. He ended the year, he and his team ended the year with a 12-5 record, which is huge after going 4-13 last year and then 8-8 the year before. So he had more wins in this one year, in his rookie year, than the Commanders have in the past 2 years before that. As I mentioned, the Commanders actually sit in 5th for points per game on average with 28.5. They've consistently been able to score points week in, week out. They've scored 20 or more in 15 out of 17 games. Yet again, momentum is key. The Tampa Bay Bucs have been rolling. They've won 6 of the last 7 games, but let's not go crazy over that, as 6 wins were against the Raiders, Giants, Panthers twice, Chargers and the Saints. They lost to a poor Cowboys side in a must-win game in Week 18 against the Saints as well. They also came very, very close to being upset in that game. They also got swept in the season by the Falcons. That meant they had to have a battle for the division in Week 18, which is probably the weakest division in the league. The Commanders have won 5 games on the bounce also. Similarly to the Bucs, they haven't played high caliber opponents, winning against the Titans, Saints, Falcons, Cowboys, which was with their backups, and the Eagles. The Eagles is a noticeable win though, as they are the 2nd seed, and the Falcons is another noticeable win, as the Bucs got swept by their division rivals and they actually really struggled against the Falcons too. In those 5 wins, they scored 42, 20, 36, 30 and 23, averaging 30 points in those last 5 straight wins to end the season. Both quarterbacks are playing at an elite level, but the Commanders will come into this one healthier and most rested, as they were able to limit their starters to a few drives before letting them sit for the rest of the game in Week 18, while the Bucs had a hard-fought win in their final game of the regular season. The Bucs have a number of key players out. Obviously, Chris Godwin. A depleted defense gets even more injuries, as Whitehead is already ruled out. Dean and Winfield Jr. are both questionable, and Edwards also left early but is expected to go. So there is a chance the Bucs secondary will be playing below 100%. With that being said, a depleted defense and a hot offense for the Commanders. Give me the red hot offense of the Commanders to score points on a defense that already allows quite a lot of points. So the play for this one is going to be 1 unit on the Commanders, team total over 23.5, and that's at plus money at 2.0 plus 100.
Monday Night Football.
So the final game of this week comes on Monday Night Football. This is a little bit of a sticky one, actually, because it is meant to be in LA, and obviously there's been a huge amount of wildfires in LA, so prayers up to anyone that's living in LA and anything like that. I hope everyone is safe and well. So the game has actually been moved away from LA, and it's going to be in Arizona. It's going to be in the Cardinals stadium. So like I said, the final game of the week comes on Monday Night Football. For the most part this season, I stuck to my original preseason predictions. They didn't actually do me too badly. I did a full episode on breaking down the AFC and the NFC. I went through division by division, team by team, on who I think could upset people and who I think will slip a little bit. I actually predicted the Rams to be a surprise contender in their division, but I also predicted the Vikings to be a no-show. So 50-50 on those two predictions. The Rams struggled for the first half of the season. They actually went through a tough time. They lost Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams lost some time in that first few months. They actually started 1-4. Then they had a bye week in week 6, and they went on to lose only 3 more games during the season. So they ended their season with a 9-3 record in the last 12 games. On the season, they went 10-7. When you look at the playoff bracket, there is still one team that catches my eye, and I feel like they don't belong, and that team is the Vikings. They may have ended their season 14-3, but they had the opportunity to be the number 1 seed with a shootout with the Lions last week, and they absolutely bottled it. They scored only 9 points on offense. They allowed 31, I think it was, to the Lions. 10 of the Vikings' 14 wins have been kept within 1 score. So to me, that doesn't scream dominant number 1 seed to me. So I think they're a similar team to the Chiefs. Everyone should know by now how I feel about the Chiefs. I think they're very fraudulent. I think they're a very lucky team, and I think the Vikings are similar to those Chiefs on the other side of the division, on the other side of the conference. They've only played 4 playoff teams this season. They beat the Packers twice and the Texans once, as they lost twice to the Lions. They were also beaten 30-20 by the LA Rams. The Minnesota defense has a lot to do with them getting wins. They allow the 5th least points per game, but in those 6 games against playoff teams, they allowed the Packers to score 29 and 25, the Lions to score 31 twice, and obviously the Rams to score 30. So they've actually not played too well against those 6 playoff teams. The LA Rams themselves also have only played a handful of playoff teams. They went 2-3, but the most noticeable was them beating the Buffalo Bills in a show. They won that one 44-42. Their divisional games were a lot harder than the NFC North, I feel, this year. All season long, all 4 teams had a shot to win their division. At one point, they were all tied or within 1 win of each other. I think at one point it was something like 6-5, 6-5, 5-6, 5-6, or something like that. They're very, very close division. So obviously that led to them all having hard-fought wins and losses. The Rams offense has played a lot better than their 21 points per game average, as is their defense with their 22 points per game average. If you take away last week's pointless game to end the season where no LA starters played, and you take away that huge shootout game with the Bills, the Rams defense has held the last 4 teams faced to under 2 touchdowns. They allowed 14 to the Saints, 6 to the 49ers, 9 to the Jets, and 9 to the Cardinals. They've really stepped up in the latter stage of the season. The Rams have looked really good most of this year, especially in those wins against the Minnesota Vikings and the Buffalo Bills. Like I said previously, the Vikings will head into this game with a loss on their backs as they took a beat down by the Lions, losing 31-9. That will be a mightily bitter one as they weren't just fighting for the division rival. They lost out on that number 1 seed. And obviously the more all-important wildcard bye weekend and home field advantage as well. The Rams, on the other hand, they also took a loss. Their backups took a loss. None of the Rams starting players even took to the field. They weren't even in uniform. None of the Rams starters played a single snap. They head into this game well rested, ready to upset the Minnesota Vikings. In their previous meeting, the Rams handled Brian Flores' aggressive defense. Matt Stafford was sacked 0 times. Interestingly, that game was off the back of a Vikings loss to the Lions, which is the same as this week coming. Many teams have struggled to bounce back from a loss against the Lions, probably down to the way the Lions play. They're very physical. Their ability to expose opponents is obviously drastic as well. So that's sort of what happened with the Vikings last week. They played a very physical Lions, and they got exposed. They were opened up, exposed. I think they do actually struggle against this Rams defense again this week. The Rams own the last 3 head-to-head meetings, winning by 7 in all 3 games. They don't play each other too often, but essentially I believe it comes all down to who do you trust more. A veteran who has been here multiple times before. He owns a 4-1 winning playoff record with the Rams. He's also a Super Bowl champion just 3 seasons ago. Or do you go with a playoff newbie with Sam Darnold in his first playoff start? You can give me the veteran all day with his star wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, his star running back, Kyren Williams. They were all fully rested and ready to go under this Sean McVay masterclass incoming. So I'm going to 1 unit on the Rams money line at plus 110, which is 2.1 odds. So I said this is going to be a long one. I hope you've all actually enjoyed this episode, but we ain't done yet. We've actually got one more play, and then I'm going to run down a few sort of non-official touchdown tips that I've got for this weekend as well. So we've got one more play, and it's going to be an NFL Wildcard Weekend teaser. It consists of 3 teams that I love to cover these huge spreads for reasons I've mentioned in the individual plays prior. I actually love this teaser. I think it's absolutely smacks. I'm going to give an honourable mention and a big shout out to Daily College Bets for this one too. He's actually shared and posted his version of this teaser. He shared it with me earlier in the week, and he actually posted it on Twitter, I believe, yesterday. I decided to amend it slightly. I bought some more points to make it a little bit safer if possible, but we actually aligned on a lot of sides this week. This is a little bit juiced for a 3-leg play, so if you don't like this kind of juice, head over to Daily's Twitter, and you can tail his. He's got his lines a little bit shorter than I have, but I don't see how any of these 3 teams don't cover these huge spreads. So it's going to be a 1-unit teaser. The first one is going to be the Denver Broncos plus 19.5. The second is going to be the Green Bay Packers plus 14.5. And the third is going to be the LA Rams plus 10.5. And that's going to be odds of 1.76. But like I said, there's no way I don't believe any of these 3 teams, don't keep this within 1 touchdown. So having these kind of spreads, kind of playable odds, is a little bit baffling to me. So that's the final official play of my wildcard weekend, but I'm going to go into some non-official touchdown tips. These are all players that I've took as a single to score a touchdown, and I've actually parlayed them all as well. So to those of you who don't remember, in week 1 I hit a huge 6-leg touchdown parlay. Obviously consisted of 6 players. all scored a touchdown, and that was in week 1. So I think it'll be rude not to at least share what I'm going to be playing for postseason week 1. So I'm going to go through each player. I'll give their odds, and then I'll give the combined odds for the parlay as well. So the first one is going to be, it's actually one touchdown per game this weekend. So the first leg is Lad McConkey. You can get him at odds of plus 140. Lad has become Herbert's top target. He averages 7 targets per game. He catches 5. He averages 71 yards, 7 total touchdowns. While McConkey isn't the number 1 red zone target, he gets 16% of red zone targets. He does have 9 touches inside the 20. He's caught all 9. He converts at 55% into a touchdown within the red zone. Johnson and Palmer both questionable. Ladd is already the primary number 1 receiver. It wouldn't surprise me to see Herbert get to him often. So I think he's got a huge upside in this game to get a touchdown. Next one is going to be Lamar Jackson at odds of plus 230. So Lamar, he's quarterback 1 and he's running back 2 as well. To me, he's the best quarterback in the league. And although he's only rushed for 4 touchdowns this year, I think he snagged one here. He averages 8 carries per game. Inside the red zone, he rushes 22% of the team's total attempts, which is 20 times. Obviously, Henry is the main rushing threat, but I think Lamar can do it all when needed. He's not afraid to put his body on the line. Also, a fun fact, he's never actually scored a rushing touchdown against the Steelers, so I'm sure he'd like to change that in this game. Lamar Jackson. Third leg is going to be James Cook. You can get him at odds of minus 130, which is 1.7. James Cook, the joint top rushing touchdown scorer in the league, averages 1.1 touchdown per game. He's obviously played 16 games. He's been a key contributor to the Bills' point scoring this year. He scored a touchdown in 4 straight games to end the season. He also has a total of 12 touchdowns in his last 10 games. Cook gets 29% of all team red zone opportunities and converts them to a touchdown on 25% of the time as well. Next one is going to be my guy Josh Jacobs. You can get him at odds of plus 100, which is 2.0. He scored a touchdown in 8 straight games and 12 of those touchdowns in his last 8. He's a great bet to make it 9 games in a row. He's seen 61 red zone touches this season. As always, he's going to be a huge part of the game script on offense for the Packers. Now, this next one is a bit of a huge long shot kind of one, but I actually really like it a lot. It's going to be Olamide Zaccheaus. You can get him at plus 350, which is 4.5 odds. His production has increased in the last 3 weeks. This is actually quite key. He scored 3 touchdowns in those same 3 weeks. So Terry McLaurin will be doubled. He's obviously the main man. He's allowed Zaccheaus to roam free a little bit. He's got into the end zone in recent weeks as well. The Tampa Bay secondary is depleted, like I mentioned. They allow 1.6 passing touchdowns per game. In the first 13 weeks, up until the bye week for the Commanders, his snap count high was 34. Since that bye week, which is the last 4 weeks, he's had 36, 48, 57 and 38. So he's actually had more snaps in the last 4 weeks than he has in any game in the first 13 weeks, and that obviously highlights his increase in workload. I think he's going to get a lot of targets in this game, and I would not surprise me to see him get into end zone at all. The final touchdown play for me is going to be Kyren Williams at odds of 1.73. He's a top 5 running back in terms of yards and touchdowns, which is huge considering they were playing from behind for a lot of the first half of the season. He has the most carries in the league, but he has a total of 16 touchdowns. He ended the season scoring 6 touchdowns in his last 6 games. He was obviously rested in week 18. It's going to be no surprise to see Williams with most of the red zone workload. He already has 75% of rushes and 45% of team touches in the opposition team's 20. He actually converts into a touchdown on 20% of the time. He does face a tough run D, but he did total over 100 scrimmage yards and a touchdown against the Rams in their 30-20 win this year. Those 6 players again: Lad McConkey, Lamar Jackson, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Olamide Zaccheaus, Kyren Williams. If you parlay all those, you get odds of 1.79, which is plus 1,790 in American odds. So that's obviously huge stats. So I don't actually have fantasy plays for this week, but I suppose you could use those 6 players as fantasy options for your fantasy football teams. I like all those to get into the end zone. A lot of those are going to have a lot of yardage as well. You're going to see a lot of touches. So any one of those 6 players could really get you some high points in this week's fantasy football as well. So that brings me to the end of this episode. I did say it's going to be a long one. So let's wrap it up. I'll go through my card again quickly. So we've got 1 unit on the Chargers minus 2.5, 1 unit Ravens team total over 26.5, 1 unit Broncos team total over 17.5, 1 unit Bo Nix over 22.5 rushing yards, 2 units Packers first quarter team total over 0.5, 1 unit Packers first quarter plus 0.5, Commanders team total over 23.5 for 1 unit, 1 unit on the Rams money line, and then you got the 1 unit on the teaser, which was Broncos plus 19.5, Packers plus 14.5, and the Rams plus 10.5. So appreciate everyone for listening so long. I did say it was going to be a long one. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death. It would mean a lot if you could go over to all socials. I'll link it in the link tree below in the description. If you can click that, follow me on all socials or follow back. Like, subscribe, share. Try and build this up a little bit. It allows me to help more people make some money as well. So hopefully everyone has a lovely weekend. Enjoy watching all the games, cash some tickets, and I'll catch you later.